When most gamers in the West think about the first entry into the Animal Crossing series, their minds venture back to Nintendo's purple box, the GameCube. Hitting store shelves in North America on September 16, 2002, 2003 in Australia, and 2004 in Europe, this non-game captured the hearts of not just hardcore gamers, but gamers that could find comfort in this laid-back communication game. Now for many, this was their entry point to the series. However, gamers in Japan got this game a year and a half earlier on a completely different platform. Danny from the Famicast here, and today we're taking a look back at Animal Crossing, or Animal Forest, on the Nintendo 64, and letting you know about the game overall, and some of the differences between the later Western releases in this retro review. Dōbutsu no Mori, or Animal Forest, was originally released for the Nintendo 64 in Japan on April 14, 2001. Development on this late N64 title was the brainchild of Nintendo's Katsuya Eguchi, who was involved in various roles with other classic Nintendo titles, such as Super Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario World, Star Fox, Wave Race 64, and a few other games. Now, before the Animal Crossing series came to be known what it is today, Animal Forest, in this original designing and planning of the game, was shaping up to be something quite different. Now, planning and development for Animal Forest started out on the Nintendo 64 disk drive. At a 2006 GDC panel, Eguchi actually expanded on some of the ideas that were being thrown around early in development. The 64DD version would have been more goal-oriented, and kind of more in line with something like an RPG. Now, the idea here would have been to assist animals in a variety of ways, with, like I said, numerous goals in mind. Now, Eguchi and his team were hoping to make a multiplayer-focused game that would make use of the higher capacity 64DD discs, online components via the 64DD's RANnet service, and also using the add-on's real-time clock. Now, obviously, with the 64DD being delayed on a regular basis and then becoming near redundant by the time it was actually released in late '99, development shifted over to the standard N64 cartridge format. Now, this shift meant that Eguchi and his team would have to make several cutbacks to the original plan. Of course, the communication aspects and the idea of having a game with multiple players are some of the only features that would remain from the original 64DD design. Understandably so, if you've played the GameCube version of Animal Crossing, you're going to feel right at home with Animal Forest. Now, the in-game systems here remain pretty much the same. Now, after getting a place to live from the opportunistic Tom Nook, you're locked into a mortgage, in the long run, for hundreds of thousands of bells. Now, unlike real life though, there are no threatening letters from creditors or scary folks calling you up on the phone about it. You're free to make as much or as little money as you want, and you could use this money to buy furniture, clothing, and even Famicom games. And just a quick note about the games that are in this N64 version, there are a total of 7 titles, and those games are Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr. Math, Tennis, Pinball, Golf, Clu Clu Land, and Balloon Fight. Now, many of the games can be purchased from Tom Nook's shop via the catalog, while some of them can be obtained by other means, like raffles or presents from other villagers, stuff like that. And if you purchase these games through the catalog, you'll notice that none of these games are labeled. They're simply listed as Famicom, if you could read the Japanese there. Now, each of these cards sport a different color, so I guess if you're a keen-eyed gamer that has a real knowledge of Famicom games and colors of cartridges, well, or just look at a guide, you might be able to figure out which game is which. Obviously, communication plays a big part in the Animal Crossing series, and things are no different in Animal Forest on the 64. The villagers want to talk with you, either face-to-face or via letters. They even keep track of how long it's been since you've spoken with them last. Now, having not booted up this game for years, I definitely caught a lot of flack from the animals. Now, just a little background on my copy of the game. It's, actual copy that I got here in Japan. I bought this about 10 years ago or so, but even then I hadn't loaded up the other saves from my village. I just made my own and kind of didn't mess with the other people's saves. But this time I kind of went in just to see kind of what they had and all that type of stuff. And whenever I actually went up to one of the villagers, it kind of just made me think wow, these guys actually have some pretty quote-unquote sharp memories, but they were really quick to remind me that it had been 964 weeks since we had last spoken. That's 18 and a half years. So, but immediately after the animal, as you're seeing right now, made kind of a big deal about this, then she proceeded to talk to me as if nothing was wrong. So that was kind of funny. That's the type of stuff that you'll get to see here. Pretty much stuff that you'll see in any Animal Crossing, but it's still fun to see. And graphically, much like its GameCube port, Animal Forest isn't going to blow you away with its visuals. I mean, things are made up of simple polygonal models mixed in with sprites for a variety of items. Now, even at the time when this was released, it wasn't really a looker. However, I would say that this simplistic look fits this game very well. It wasn't attempting to blow you away on the visual front, but rather draw you in with an inviting aesthetic both visually and on the audio front. And I think it succeeds extremely well in these regards. Having been away from the series for so long, especially here recently, it felt really good to get back into it with Animal Forest on the 64, especially for me with the communication aspects for the animals. There's a good variety of characters, and it's always interesting to see what they're up to, to an extent. I mean, to top that off, the gameplay here, for more of the quote-unquote action-oriented aspects of the game, all this stuff's spot on. I mean, fishing's simple, but fun. Catching bugs takes patience and a little bit of stealth. Participating in the various events, catching KK Slider's concert, making tons of cash, all of these prove fun then as well as now, even with a somewhat lesser version of the game with the N64 version that we're talking about here. I should note that if you're actually hoping to play a legit copy of this game, you might want to brush up a little bit on your Japanese. With the game being aimed at a younger audience though, the hiragana and katakana might be a little bit easier though. On a bit more of a technical side of things, there are actually quite a few interesting things that were put into Animal Forest. Now, to match with the original planning, the team decided to put a special real-time clock inside of the cartridge itself. Obviously, with the Nintendo 64 not having an internal clock, the 64 DD does though, this was a workaround that allowed players to be able to play the game all year around for years and years and on a schedule. You set your date and all that stuff. Now, with my copy of the game, and probably any copies that you would pick up these days, the internal clock resets every time after you turn off the game. And this means that you're going to have to set it before you start every single time. With these cartridges and stuff being old, it's understandable that this type of stuff can happen. It's kind of a nuisance, but not a huge deal. Now, like in all Animal Crossings that preceded it, Animal Forest also allows players to visit other towns. Now, in order to do this, you're going to need a controller pack. And as long as you have 18 free pages, you will be able to leave your village via the train station and visit your friend's town. Now, you're only able to have one set of travel data per controller pack. So if you have a controller pack set aside specifically just for Animal Crossing, you're going to be just fine. So of the 123 pages available on the standard controller pack, 101 pages can be used to save letters. And the previously mentioned 18 that we talked about for visiting friends can be used here. Just be sure to keep that in mind if you're wanting to travel to your friends' villages, if you have any friends that have the N64 version of this game. Now, there is some information out there that says Animal Forest makes use of the expansion pack to up the resolution of the game from the standard 320 by 240 to 640 by 480, basically 480i. But I've looked for information to back this up in Japanese and in English, and I haven't really found anything. Now, the instruction manual itself says that the game does not support the peripheral, but at the same time, there's no need to change out for the jumper pack or anything. I've even went and compared the game with both the expansion pack in and the jumper pack in and found that the resolution doesn't really appear to change no matter which device is inserted into the console. I mean, this is all done by eye, but if there's any difference, it definitely wasn't significant. Some characters and other staples of the series are absent in Animal Forest. For example, just to rattle off a few things here, there's no Blathers, there's no museum, Able Sisters for the ability to make designs, there's no Mayor Tortimer, there's less fish and bugs, and there's a limit of one item per storage unit and a limit of one song per player, no basement, no second floor expansions for your house. Just to name a few things. Other localization changes, like removing Japanese from places like the dump or the shop, they're changed for the Western release on the GameCube. I mean, events themselves can vary slightly here too. So for example, during the Cherry Blossom Festival in Animal Forest in the 64, the animals are actually sitting on tatami mats. Another one that I noticed too is that for the morning aerobics in the summertime, that you can't actually participate. You can only just kind of walk around and talk to the animals. A text entry here too is also a little bit different, lacking a traditional keyboard and instead having like this turn dial system. Even with these aspects missing or slightly altered, playing Animal Forest is an interesting look to see how the developers made the game even more approachable and fun for players in the later versions. In the Western release of Animal Crossing, the Wishing Well served as a place where all the animals get together for a variety of events. However, in the N64 version and the GameCube re-release Animal Forest Plus, a shrine was actually used in its place. Now, I think this actually has some cultural significance. So, years ago, many Japanese people would actually go to local shrine for events like New Year's Eve and other traditional Japanese events. Now, some of these events present in Animal Forest represent that pretty well. Now, the morning aerobics in the summertime, Cherry Blossom Festival, the summer fireworks, these are all times when the animals get together to have a good time with all of the other villagers. And, while things like this still happen in Japan in some small local communities throughout the country, things have changed quite a bit in the past few decades. Now, there are big things like New Year's, and I think a lot of people visit shrines and stuff like that. But from talking to Japanese friends and family and stuff, it seems to me that a lot of these smaller events just kind of fell by the wayside. Of course, again, this is just coming from talking to people around me in rural Saitama Prefecture. Things like this will vary from place to place, however. I think that these community-based activities are definitely on the decline. But it's interesting to see that they were in Animal Crossing in this very Japanese way. Now, one other thing that always stuck out to me in Animal Crossing and Animal Forest here, the early versions of the game, was how the post office and the bank were at the same location. Well, there's actually a very interesting reason for that. So here in Japan, the post office, Japan Post, is typically linked to a bank, Japan Post Bank. And you can find these things all over the country. Now, on the outside of the post office building in this N64 version, you can see what is clearly the post office mark that is often associated with Japan Post. Now, this was changed for the Western releases. The postmark was just removed entirely from the model, but the functionality of both the bank and post office still remain at the same location. So I thought that was pretty interesting and never really knew why, but after coming here, now I get it, and hopefully you do too. Now, one last little anecdote here. Now, so the police station is something that can be found in nearly every Animal Crossing release to date. Now, again, as with the post office stuff, before coming to Japan and as an American, I always thought that the police station itself in Animal Crossing and Animal Forest seemed to be a little bit on the small side. Now, I was kind of chalking it up to maybe it's just because the village itself isn't exactly a bustling metropolitan area, but I think it's interesting to note that small police boxes, known as koban, in Japan are littered throughout the country. Now, these mini police stations serve as places where local officers can help with giving directions, keeping a general watch on their area, maintaining a lost and found, and, a few other things. Now, unlike large-scale police station, the station officers probably aren't going to investigate murders or anything like that. So in this way, it makes sense for a koban to actually be in villages in Animal Forest. It's not a big area, it's not a big town, and then if you think about like the characters that are actually running the police stations in Animal Crossing, they're not really doing much. They're really diligent, but it's definitely a more low-key kind of a job, just like what officers would be doing at a koban typically. Now, as you may remember from the beginning of the video, Dōbutsu no Mori, or Animal Forest, this was originally released on April 14th, 2001 in Japan. Two versions of this game were actually released at the same time, one that came packaged with a controller pack and another without. Now, the version I have is one that came with the controller pack, and if you're looking to find this game to fit into your collection, it might be a little difficult to find a complete clean set. The card itself actually had a space for players to write their names. Now, unfortunately, depending on maybe your point of view, but the version I have is pristine with no writing on the card, and the stickers for the memory card actually were unused as well, which is pretty cool. Now, in my search for old stuff that nobody wants, I was actually able to track down a kind of an interesting piece of history that nobody cares about. Yes, this is an Animal Forest shipping box. So yeah, of course, it's literally just an empty box, and it's not the first one that I have in my gaming collection, but these would have been used back in the day to ship copies of the game to retailers. Each box held about 10 copies of the game. But, what would have happened to most of these boxes after the fact, most retailers would have just thrown these boxes in the trash. So These are kind of rare and kind of hard to come across, so I doubt there are really too many of these still around these days. As a gaming experience, is it really worth playing or even hunting down this late N64 classic? Well, you know, in terms of functionality, the GameCube version, or versions, of Animal Crossing have everything that can be found here and then some. But at the same time, if you're wanting to just have a cool collector's item, you should absolutely track down a copy of the game. It's an interesting piece of history that too many people overlook when discussing Animal Crossing as a whole. It shows the origins of the series and also gives you a good look at how the game evolved over time. It also still plays fantastically and has all of the things that you would want from a game in the series. Animal Forest on the Nintendo 64 is a worthy addition to any gaming collection. As always, thanks for checking out this video. If you like what you see, please feel free to give us a like. If you're new to the channel, please feel free to subscribe. We got tons of podcasts, video reviews, special videos, and a whole lot more. Again, this is Danny from the Famicast. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you later.